Morant with a running start. Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! Oh, he hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Chris Herrington. Chris, how's your summer going?
Summer's going okay. I've been doing a lot of moving. I drove a U-Haul truck. I guess it was a U-Haul technically. I'm not trying to give a free plug, but it was technically U-Haul. I drove a U-Haul truck from Memphis to St. Paul, and then this weekend I drove a cargo van from St. Paul to Chicago, moving my daughter into an apartment up there as she gets ready for year 2 of college. And so, while a lot of stuff was going on with the Olympics and NBA rumors, I was puttering along in a cargo van along whatever interstate that is from St. Paul to Chicago.
You weren't making calls from your U-Haul, checking the veracity of Tyus Jones reports?
So it's funny, the Tyus Jones to the Grizzlies news cycle from a rumor that he might sign with the Grizzlies, which there was a lot of chatter about, I guess, online, to the news that he was going to sign with Phoenix, which I gather was like a 3 or 4 hour cycle. All that happened while I was driving to St. Paul. And so I did see that happening. I thought, I'm driving a truck. I'm not going to try to weigh in on this. I don't think Tyus Jones was ever going to come back to the Grizzlies. I'm not dismissive totally of the stuff that was out there about that listed the Grizzlies among like 5 or 6 teams or whatever.
Yeah.
I do think that like conversations happen all over the NBA all the time. And when stuff like that gets mentioned, like not like some serious specific rumor, just like among the teams interested in so-and-so, and it just lists a bunch of teams. I think most of the time that's not made up out of whole cloth. There's something to that, right?
Yeah.
So my guess would be that when it reached the point that like Tyus Jones' market was disappearing, and it was like, oh crap, well, we gotta find a landing spot for
totally
Tyus.
Gone. Yeah.
I'm sure his agent like was on the phone talking to all kinds of teams, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Grizzlies, who like have a relationship with Tyus Jones and like don't have a clear-cut, obvious backup point guard on the main roster, it wouldn't surprise me if that conversation happened. But Tyus Jones was not going to come to the Memphis Grizzlies for a 1-year minimum.
Yeah.
He can go to Phoenix and like play a much bigger role on a 1-year minimum. That makes a lot more sense for him. So even if the Grizzlies had any interest at all, and I don't think it really made a lot of sense for either side, even if they had any interest, it wasn't going to be for that. It was going to have to be for something bigger than that. And so I doubt, it wouldn't surprise me if conversations were had, but I doubt that it got very far down the road would be my guess.
There's more about this Tyus Jones story that I actually do want to get into, because just the concept of them being like, yeah, okay, we'll pay you whatever the taxpayer MLE is, just in case, like, you want $5 million? Because we could probably swing that and give you a roster spot. Even that on its own, to me, is extremely interesting for what the Grizzlies are even like considering with their roster. But let's put a pin in that. Let's just knock out a few, I guess, other news items that I've felt like I should go over. The things I was going to talk about on today's episode before this exciting, like 3 to 6 hour rumor mill of Tyus Jones and the Grizzlies being in contention for him. I feel like we should mention Santi Aldama, played for Spain, made 27 points or scored 27 points in a blowout defeat to the Germans. Summer Santi continues to be a thing.
It was
FIBA line is just perfect for him.
It was last year in FIBA, right? He played really well. And so I think, good for Santi. Yeah. I don't think it has much to say either way about the kind of NBA season he's going to have. Yeah. But Santi is an interesting figure because at this point, if we assume, I don't know how much you want to get into the Kennard stuff, if we just assume a Kennard re-signing is going to happen and like make that a presumption, not an expectation, and like say what's next, like the thing that's next is like, are they going to do an extension on Santi, which I doubt will happen.
Right.
But Santi sort of moves into the subject of intrigue or mystery on the Grizzlies roster. He's sort of maybe shifting into pole position as far as that goes.
Yeah, I think the way I broke down the roster, which I think is consensus, is there's like a very clear 8 players that you're like, that's the top 8. And it does not include Santi Aldama. Santi Aldama is like maybe in the argument for 9th, maybe if Luke Kennard comes back, which we've been saying, Chris, since what? This is July 29th. We're talking.
So you're talking about Vince Williams Jr., Brandon Clark, and who? Gigi?
I'm including Gigi. Is that too presumptuous of me?
I think it's true in terms of who is most important to the organization writ large going forward.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you throw the basketball up tomorrow night, he's necessarily one of the top 8.
Okay, so this is a controversial thing. I actually was not arguing. In Las Vegas, I raised Chris Vernon's eyebrows. This is even before Gigi had good games at Summer League. Remember, Gigi was not good in Utah.
It was terrible game 1.
His first game in Vegas was it was terrible shooting numbers, but maybe he had a couple of highlights. I was saying at that point, if we're trying to win a basketball game tonight, if the first round of the playoffs was tonight and the main roster, not the Summer League roster, if the main roster was fully healthy, I was like, well, I'm pretty sure Gigi's getting a DMP. And also, if one guy had to play, I think it might be Jake LaRavia, just because as defense, maybe spacing, maybe just low usage fits in a little bit better. That was my hot take based on just, again, this was before Gigi even had his final 3 or 4 good games.
I don't know about that, but I also don't know that Gigi in a playing time pecking order game 1, I don't know that ggjackson's ahead of Santi Aldama and Luke Kennard.
Okay. You're saying game 1 regular season.
Yeah. And so to me, I could see him and with Gigi, who knows? He could end up starting on this team. I don't know.
At some point.
But if I'm just gaming out a rotation to start the season, if I'm assuming a Taylor Jenkins 10-man rotation, I do have Gigi Jackson in it, but I think he may be 10th.
Gotcha. For me, when you say going forward that we agree he's one of the more important pieces, or he's in the top 8 most important pieces as far as your roster. For me, the way that should translate to regular season basketball, that's we're giving him minutes, whatever.
I agree.
End of October when the season starts, no. If you're not playing Gigi Jackson 20 minutes a game off the bench, why? Give me a very good reason why. There's no reason Luke Kennard should be playing, in, again, my opinion, more minutes than Gigi Jackson, because let's give Gigi Jackson some burn to see what he becomes. I know what Luke Kennard is. And so I
think there's more potential for fluctuation in Gigi Jackson's role over the course of 82 games.
Sure.
I think he could hit some rough stretches where they ease off on him a little bit. He could get hot and they ease in. I just think there's a lot more room for up and down. I think if Luke Kennard and Santi Aldama are on this roster when the season opens, and my expectation is both will be, I just don't see those guys not being in the rotation.
I could imagine, again, if you do, cause I did game out a 9-man rotation and a 10-man rotation, and Taylor did do some 9-man rotations last year. And
I think he is less wedded to the 10-man than he was a couple years ago.
Right. What was funny last year, there were games where we were slightly healthy, or there would be games where we weren't that healthy and we played 9 guys. And then we get super healthy. No, I had this backwards. There were games where there were less good players available, and all of a sudden we went to a 10-man rotation. When in games where it was so confusing to me, where it seemed reversed to what I would have expected. We don't have as much talent. Let's just play 9 guys. It's no. We're missing guys. Let's go 10.
Well, they shifted into a different mode.
They did. That's true as well. We sacrificed how many months of our lives to end up with the 9th pick. I mean, we got Zach Edey. That's fine. My new hot take, by the way, I've been working on this in my Patreon Slack channel. I haven't come out with it big time. The Grizzlies wasted a year of my life for the 9th pick. The Timberwolves went and got the 8th pick for nothing. So I'm still maybe Zach Edey works out great. This is not a commentary on Rob Dillingham or Zach Edey. It's just merely the one team made the conference finals and got the 8th pick.
Yeah.
Trading away 31 picks.
My thing is that the active measures took them from, the 12th pick to the 9th pick or whatever. They didn't have, being good was not a choice. They could not choose to be good last season. That ability was stripped away.
I mean, Desmond Bain and Marcus Smart could have played, but that's neither here nor there.
No, they could have been better, but they could not have been good.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Santi Aldama, we were saying, he scored a lot of points for Spain. I actually watched this game in its entirety. And again, it's like, he made shots. When Santi makes shots, looks really nice. And that's going to be the question mark for him. I did not watch Yuki Kawamura play. The Exhibit 10 guy that is playing for Japan. He's going to be in training camp with the Grizzlies.
I completely forgot about
slipped your mind. I had to check my notes to remember the name exactly. He had 11 points and 7 assists, made 3 out of 11 field goal attempts.
Santi's interesting, Japan.
Yeah.
Let's that flash forward 3 years. Whether he's with the Grizzlies or somewhere else, he will be in the NBA in 3 years. Santi Aldama will be in the NBA in 3 seasons.
Yeah.
What will his role be in the NBA? Will he be a starter in the NBA in 3 seasons? I don't know. It was possible, but I don't know,
I think I said it on a episode maybe last week sometime where people, when we look at the roster and clearing roster spaces and they're like, oh, we got to get, or even salary, like we salary dump Zaire and maybe we need to move Conchar or Adama to make even more room under the luxury tax line. I was pushing back against Santi is a guy that I assume the organization still believes in a lot. And if you were someone pushing to draft him when he was 20, and you've seen what you've seen through 3 years, you probably still want to see what it looks like you're saying, in 3 or 4 years. When he's 26, 27.
I think I would say they like Santi Aldama. They plucked him at 30. He's turned into a much better player than his draft position, at least. I think they feel good about that. I think they like the way he finished the season. He had kind of an up and down season. There's a stretch in there, and the way I phrased it, in an imprecise way, he just felt like he was drifting to me. It felt unserious for a while there with Santi. It was sort of disappointing. But I think he finished pretty strong. I think the team likes the way he finished. The issue there is Jaren is obviously more of a part of the long-term plan. Zach Edey's more of a part of the long-term plan. Brandon Clark, at least for now, is more part of the long-term plan. And then while he's a little bit different place on the positional spectrum, he's not radically different on the positional spectrum from ggjackson and Jake LaRavia. It's easy to envision ggjackson just usurping Aldama in terms of that role and soaking up those minutes. So I think it's a little up for grabs with Aldama right now. Yeah,
I agree definitely that those Aldama minutes could go towards ggjackson or LaRavia. I mean, or even Jay Huff, two-way player. Not that they prioritize that. One thing I do like about the Jay Huff thing, and I'll just
your called shot.
It was a called shot. My
called shot was only that it would not be Trey Jemison, but I didn't.
I didn't go that far. By the way, Trey Jemison got claimed by the Pelicans, so he's going back home to the New Orleans Pelicans, gonna play for the Birmingham Squadron again. So I'm glad to see Trey Jemison does end up somewhere. I mean, my question, I didn't know, my called shot was not that Jemison would be gone. My question mark was, this was clearly,
you thought they might make Huff to the main roster.
No. I was saying they could move on from Jemison. I don't know if they would. If they did move on from Jemison, I had my eye on this Jay Huff fella. But
so what I said about Jemison, and I said this on the radio many times and on our pod with Drew, but I also wrote it in my summer league recap. To me, Jemison was a developmental tweener. He was not a positional tweener because he's definitely not that, but he was a developmental tweener. He was too raw to be a depth piece for the Grizzlies on a two-way. And he's too old to still be a long-term project. And I think the way they were set up, it was increasingly clear to me they were not going to keep a fifth big, or at least not a serious one. Maybe they opened the season with this Diakati guy. But it was clear to me that they were not going to have a real fifth big on the main roster to open the season, and that they needed to use their two-way, much as they're doing with Scotty Pippen Jr., to really be a Grizzlies roster player.
Yes.
And Jemison was not ready to play that role. And they were going to find someone else. I didn't know who that was going to be or when it was going to happen. I thought it could be a training camp thing. Look at who gets cut from someone else's training camp. Remember, Scotty Pippen Jr. was with the Lakers to start last season. But that they were going to look around and they were going to replace Trey Jemison with someone better able to help right now. And it looks like they've done that with Jay Huff, more than likely.
The one thing with Jay Huff that I do think obviously places him above Trey Jemison, not that I'm an expert on Jay Huff, but it does feel like it does feel like Jay theoretically can play alongside Brandon Clark and Santi Aldama. And that was one of the big keys to the Grizzlies' big man rotation as it was. We were like, well, if Jaren is ever out, this is a night. I mean, maybe Edey's awesome. Maybe Brandon Clark's totally back, but still none of the pairings seemed great. And even if Jay Huff's a two-way guy about to turn 27 with no real NBA resume, it still feels like, all right, if you squint and he's like a very poor man's Brook Lopez, he can at least maybe fit, or at least he can stand on the perimeter and pump fake from the 3-point line. Yeah, and maybe someone will respond.
Yeah, no, there are two keys to the player in that role, giving you actual functional depth. A, they have to be good enough to give you 10 minutes in an NBA game that matters. And B, they have to have enough versatility to play with different lineups. Jemison, you felt like at least, from a functional, whether he's good enough is a different question, but he could play with Jaren, he could play with Santi, he couldn't play with Brandon or Zach. I think with Jay Huff, you get 3 out of the 4. Can he play with Zach Edey? I don't know about that.
Yeah,
but the other 3, it feels like he could probably play with, if you're in a pinch.
Yeah, you cross your fingers that he will work there. Let's talk now about this Tyus Jones thing in just a little bit more depth. So Tyus Jones ends up going to the Suns. It was for the minimum. It was sort of surprising, or I'd say it's surprising enough that Tyus Jones had to release a statement explaining why he went to the Suns.
I wonder, and I haven't read any reporting on this, I wonder how much of, from a Wizards perspective, this is also a fumble.
Fumbled by the Wizards. Yep.
And I wonder to what degree that is connected to their front office changes. Like the front office that did not trade him and cash out at the deadline is different from the front office that did not re-sign him, I guess. But I assume when they did not trade him, I know they could only get probably multiple seconds or whatever, but when they did not trade him, they had to think that they were either going to re-sign him or he was going to be a sign and trade situation. The idea that he not only leaves the free agency, but leaves for 1-year minimum. I mean, that's a disaster for the player and the team. Like how does it get to that point?
Yeah. So the first thing I heard about Tyus Jones being on the move and that something was going to happen over the weekend and that even the Grizzlies were maybe involved was this guy named Troy Halliburton, who has a Substack about the Wizards. And he was saying over the weekend that, yes, the Grizzlies were interested, the Timberwolves, the Hawks, and the Suns. He said those are the ones interested. He, in like a recap after the signing happened, basically said that Tyus Jones made a miscalculation on himself because the Wizards offered him this offseason multiple years around close to $10 million. And Tyus felt like he wanted to get paid more like a starting point guard. But yes, of course, the Wizards miscalculated in the regular season last year.
And that this offer was no longer available to him at this point.
Yeah. So then once they traded Brogdon, so they traded Denny Avdia on draft night or the day before, I can't remember, but like they bring in Brogdon. They wanted to then reroute Malcolm Brogdon somewhere, but apparently maybe this Wizards new front office asks for too much. And no one's like, no, we're not giving you a 1st-round pick for Brogdon. Like that guy. No, he's year removed from 6th man of the year. And even then he had injury concerns. And so they thought again that they passed up multiple second rounds for Tyus last year in the regular season at the trade deadline. Then this Brogdon deal, they couldn't reroute Brogdon. Now they have 17 guys under contract and they have Brogdon. And it was like, all right, that deal was gone for Tyus. So yeah. And then they couldn't work out a sign and trade. So Tyus is saying he was promised a starting job for the Suns, which is notable because I don't think he's going to close for the Suns.
Well,
he might.
He's one of their top 6 players, right? But you've got Booker and you've got Beal, who are obviously starting and closing. And then they just gave all this money to Grayson Allen. So I sort of see him as like the 6th man who plays a lot during the flow of the game. I'm not sure about the starting or the closing on that one. Yeah. But I do think Phoenix and Minnesota, of the teams that were mentioned in that report, Phoenix and Minnesota make a lot more sense than Memphis and Atlanta do.
Yeah, I agree.
For Tyus Jones. And so I assumed it was going to be one of those 2 directions.
I think for the Suns, it's just an unbelievable get with their limitations on their roster. So they, by the way, I mean, they salary dumped sort of our guy, David Roddy. So
I didn't read anything about that.
So that
trade was that a pure salary dump for them?
Pure money. So they took
his contract was higher than E.G. Liddell.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They took Roddy had $2.8 million owed. He didn't show enough in summer league, despite I think Roddy scored 6 points in the final 5 seconds of a summer league game to win a game for the Summer Suns. But yeah, Liddell made $600,000 less. So that was salary. That was luxury tax savings. But then they're going to waive Liddell, use that roster spot on Tyus Jones. So it turned out amazing for the Suns.
Well, that part did, but it's wild that they gave up a first round pick swap, right? Which may never come to fruition.
It's a double.
They give that up to get Roddy, who they don't play in the playoffs, and then you salary dump him.
It was wasn't it a triple? That's like the one that's like a triple swap where it
involves like 3 or 4 teams.
Wizards, Suns, Magic, and Grizzlies. The odds of it conveying are you have to have a better record than all those teams.
Yeah, which is the odds
not really anything.
That.
Yeah.
Those I don't think those odds are super slim. If you were going to predict at that point, I think the Grizzlies and Magic you would predict are better than the Suns.
Here's a math equation for you. What are the odds in a 4-way pick swap? What are your odds your pick improves by more than like 2?
Because I think pretty slim.
It's real marginal type stuff. I guess there's like an upside. But still,
for a player you just did not want.
Oh no,
period.
it's the fact that Utah opted out. Did they know that? Because that is the question. If you knew Utah was opting out, to get anything for Roddy was a very good move.
I feel comfortable that they did not know as a matter of fact that was going to happen, but they did think that was very much in the realm of possibility that would happen. That was sort of a calculated gamble.
So one thing I hate about the Tyus Jones going to the Suns is I feel like it actually makes the Suns a lot better. I think what those guys were mentioning, I mean, their front court is thin. You got KD and you got Nurkic, but like off the bench, if it is Grayson Allen or even Royce O'Neal, like then you combine that with your Booker, your Bradley Beal, like Tyus, that is a very solid, like 7 guys that seems very, very good. And then them not having another way to get a good player, to get someone who's like near starter quality Tyus is just a big win. And so I don't like that from a competitive angle from the Grizzlies perspective. But thinking about, so the guy Troy Halliburton who wrote about the Wizards, he says the Grizzlies were probably second in this if it's a chase or a race for Tyus Jones. And then the Suns writer, John Gambadoro, he says the same thing. Like he passed up more money. Tyus Jones passed up more money from the Grizzlies and the Hawks. Let's just entertain the fact that the Grizzlies were interested in to the degree they said,
I think if it was more money, it wasn't much more. It's like, $5 million instead of, whatever. It's something like that.
Let's operate under that. Let's say the Grizzlies said, we will give you $5 million or $6 million. I was thinking maybe taxpayer MLE just to leave that available in case you go into the tax. But let's say it was like $5.5 million. My first question, what do you think? Would this be a signing in addition to Luke Kennard? It would be that Luke Kennard's number 14 and Tyus then would be number 15 on the roster. You think it's in addition to or in place of?
I suspect so, because I suspect at this point, there's enough of an understanding between, at this point in the game, Luke Kennard's not even talking to other teams, apparently, does it seem. So I know it's odd that they haven't actually done the deal and like fans are antsy about that.
Yeah.
Reality is training camp's like 2 months away at this point, and like somebody's on a boat somewhere or whatever. I think there's enough understanding between the Grizzlies and Kennard's agent that there's a deal there that they weren't going to renege on that because this Tyus Jones thing pops up.
So one of my immediate thoughts during this 3-hour span where you were driving a U-Haul and where there was this rumor that, hey, the Suns and Grizzlies are trying to get Tyus Jones. One of my immediate thoughts was, had the holdup on the Luke Kennard deal been some kind of out, we're like, hey, we're still waiting to see where Tyus Jones signs, because Tyus Jones is one guy who we really like, who we envision theoretically would actually be really good for us. And because of that, we haven't made this move because of Tyus Jones. What do you think about my line of thinking there?
I'm fairly comfortable saying that is not the case.
Okay.
I don't want to state as unequivocal fact. I think if there was not a firm understanding on Kennard's return to Memphis, there wouldn't be total silence on Kennard with other teams this late in the process.
Okay. If if we are operating under the idea that maybe it was going to be something smallish for Tyus, that would still be the idea.
I think the Tyus thing was like an opportunity popped up.
Uh-huh.
And it's a good enough opportunity that you go down the road and explore it.
Yeah.
But I don't think like a month ago that was part of the game planning. Like, what if Tyus Jones is suddenly I just think that's this front office has had moments of like just opportunism. Like something pops up unexpected, you jump on it. And I think that is something that probably popped up and was probably discussed. And I doubt it got very close.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you there, because one of my pushbacks was like, if you wanted Tyus Jones, you could have offered Tyus Jones, I mean, one, a lot of money, one, maybe not that much money. You could have offered him $8 million a year or $10 million a year. Anytime in the last month, essentially. If you wanted Tyus Jones, you might could have had him once he found out there wasn't really a starting job, or maybe it's harder for him to pick. I'll take a minimum starting job for the Suns over.
Obviously, Tyus Jones is a really good player, and he would help your team.
Yep.
But you're committed to having Derrick Rose on this roster spot. You're committed to playing
Derrick Rose is not a player. He's a roster spot, not a player. That's how I work on him now.
I agree, but he's still on the roster.
Yeah.
I mean, you're committed to playing Marcus Smart. You're committed to playing Vince Williams Jr. You seem to be committed to bringing Kennard back.
Yeah.
And like, we haven't talked about him yet, but like, I think they really like Scotty Pippen Jr. And so I think when the Grizzlies look out at like, we talk about the general needs of like front court depth, shooting, setting Kennard aside if Kennard's thing not done yet, right?
Yep.
Front court depth, ball handling depth, shooting. You can't have it all. What are you most concerned about? I think it was always the front court and the shooting more than the ball handling for the Grizzlies going into this summer.
Yeah.
And you can see it in what they did. Zach Edey, Jalen Wells, Cam Spencer, bringing Kennard back, Jay Huff. It's all front court and shooting.
Those are like most of those people I've never heard of until a month ago.
But that is what they did,
Yeah, it is what they did. And I agree with you. I've been saying for a while, the whole roster need did not scream Luke Kennard or Luke Kennard plus Tyus Jones. I did think maybe
Luke Kennard plus Jalen Wells plus Cam Spencer.
Yeah.
That's what I sort of wonder about,
Yeah. That's a lot of guys who are 6'4" or 6'5". I guess Wells is taller. But then also I was thinking, what about all that stuff we read about that Isolo and LaRoche and our positionless pick and roll less ball handler? I'm like, are we just going for just all point guards? Like all
I think people are way too aggressive about over interpreting stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people want to get excited about this radical new style of play. It's not going to look that different. Like, it's just, I think people have way overinterpreted, especially when the LaRoche thing happened, that there was some radical overhaul to like, then they go out. I had a Grizzlies fan text me.
Yeah.
Maybe I said this on your show before. I can't remember.
Okay.
But I had a Grizzlies fan text me, admonishing me, scolding me on my text about in one of the pre-draft pod that Drew and I did, because we were talking about Zach Edey, Donovan Clingan. And this guy texted me and said, haven't you watched these Noah LaRoche videos? Why are you talking about Zach Edey, Donovan Clingan? They don't want those kind of players.
That's great.
The players you should be talking about are Tijan Saloon and whatever else. And like, and then it comes out that they're trying to trade up maybe to draft out McClingan and they take Zach Edey. So I think people get way too far down the road with some of the stylistic
Are
stuff.
you saying I shouldn't be as overwhelmingly excited about us having an incredibly inexperienced but new coaching staff?
I do think, and I wrote a off-season wrap-up column like 2 weeks ago, waiting for them to wrap up their off-season.
Yeah.
And I am leaving the country this weekend, so like time is up. And so I filed my off-season wrap-up column this morning, which will probably go up, maybe it's up by the time people listen to this.
Okay.
And one of my, I did like 4 conclusions or whatever. One of them was about the coaching stuff. And I do think it's interesting, more new coaches and new players on this team. And I do think the coaching stuff they did is a little bit of a carryover from last season. It's like last season was like you dip the toe in the water, because they didn't overhaul the entire coaching staff. The 2 guys they kept were the 2 guys who were new last season, which was St. Andrews and Anthony Carter. And St. Andrews was about rethinking our offensive strategy and how we approach the game offensively. And Carter was about overhauling player development. And I think they pushed forward on both of those fronts. And I do think there's a belief in the organization that we need to overhaul those 2 areas. And what we recognized a year ago we have to push even further in on that stuff. But I still think assistant coaches are assistant coaches, and they only mean so much, you know?
That's where I was at, and where people also, because I've been maybe at the forefront of being worried about the Grizzlies not spending money as a franchise, as far as like the roster and the luxury tax, and as far as like MLE.
Well, that's another one of my 4 conclusions. Clearly, the Grizzlies care much more about the luxury tax than they want to let on or want to acknowledge.
Well, there you go. Thanks for I can't wait. Let's have this more reinforcement of my opinion there in your Daily Memphian article. But people will say, well, what about they hired new coaches? Where I'm like, yeah, they hired inexperienced new coaches, and they promoted from within and on some of the coaches. I don't know if that counts.
This lead assistant is like a shiny new toy.
It is a shiny new toy.
He is very shiny.
I don't know what the details of the contract were to get him over here, but also who knows? By the way, for our deep cut listeners of Dali Potapenko, he's reuniting with JB Bickerstaff in Detroit. So he lands on his feet. Let's wrap up actually with a little bit of talk about Scotty Pippen Jr. So you talked about how like you think they like him pretty well. He had a really good summer league, of course. And some people were telling me we shouldn't pursue Tyus Jones at all because we have Scotty Pippen Jr. What are your thoughts on Scotty Pippen Jr. and what his role could be?
I think his summer play is more persuasive because of his play in the regular season last season. Mm-hmm. And he had the injury stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of caveats. The season went haywire, and then I don't know what he played, 30 games, something like for the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
He was good. Like he was good when he played in those games. On both ends of the floor, he was good. I think what I was impressed by him in the summer is he felt like a little bit more like in control of the team. It felt he was a two-way guy, but it felt like he was leading the team. And is he like a Tyus Jones, Mike Conley level playmaker, true point guard? He is not. But I thought he showed improvement in terms of like being in control of the team, control of the game, in terms of setting up guys up, in terms of, adjusting to the moment. And, we need to get a foul, you get a foul, in terms of really being a leader at the point guard position. And given his physical capabilities, given his age, like he's not like 19 or whatever, I think he's got a good chance to be a quality backup point guard in the NBA like right now. And I think the Grizzlies will carry him into the season on that two-way. I don't know if he is the every game backup point guard, because I don't know if they can have an every game backup point guard when you're trying to get minutes for John Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard, and Vince Williams. Like when I envision a full strength 10-man rotation, he's not in it but I think there's going to be a need for someone to soak up a lot of those minutes over the course of 82. I think he's going to play at least twice as many minutes, if not more, than Derrick Rose does, hopefully. And I think if he keeps building on what he did, I think he's going to be on the main roster by the end of the season.
So a couple of things. One, I agree with you. If the team's healthy, there's no minutes for him. I think definitely all your guard minutes are going to other players. If, of course, Luke Kennard comes back. The thing about the roster spot, this has been, I think, a big topic among fans saying, let's sign him. Let's get him on that team friendly deal. Let's go ahead and make him roster spot 15. You don't feel like there's any urge there? I don't feel like it's an urge. I feel like it's a big asset having that roster spot open, and having him on a two-way for me is such like an advantage roster wise.
I mean, you don't have to do anything. You get 50 games or whatever. The big thing is like playoff eligibility, right? If you feel like he could, if he's having a good season, you feel like you would like to have use of him in the playoffs. That's really what drives it. Other thing that could drive it, though, is if he is really, in a way I think Vince Williams was last season, if he is really forcing the issue and you don't see him just as like, it'd be nice to have this guy on the main roster this season, you see it as let's get a 3-year, $8 million deal for this guy, you know? I think his play could force the issue at that point, and it could happen before he hits the 50-game mark. But I don't think it needs to happen until well into the season, Yeah,
I agree with that. And I agree with the idea of like, he can prove it during this season that he actually is now deserving of a roster spot because they want to lock that asset up. Absolutely. Like I had somebody who I saw people being like, we don't want Tyus Jones because Scotty Pippen Jr. is better. And I rolled my eyes a little bit, but I was also like, let's go with this. Let's pretend Scotty Pippen Jr. is better. So if we had all of them, let Scotty Pippen Jr. prove it. If Scotty Pippen Jr. is beating these guys up in practice, great. Then we can promote him, use him as an asset. My only hesitation with Scotty Pippen Jr. is there are a few stats about him that I don't know if they're concerning. One of the things he did really well on the regular season team last year is he made 3-pointers. He was like 41% from 3.
Yeah, he was 32% overall in Summer League across Salt Lake City and Vegas.
So actually, here's my concern. Last year in the regular season, 30 for 72, which was great. And it wasn't just like 1 or 2 or 3 big games like Jake LaRavia where he made 8. It was a very consistent 1 out of 2, 2 out of 4, 2 out of 5 type thing. But you just said his Summer League numbers this year, not good. His career Summer League numbers,
but they're not like atrocious. It's 32% in like 9 games or whatever.
It was 29. I believe it was 29 this year. But anyways,
I've got 32, but I was tracking my own
29 or 32. In 16 career Summer League games, he's at 25%. In 8 career preseason games, he's 22% from 3. Again, just 4 out of 18, very small sample size. His senior year at Vanderbilt, played 36 games, shot 33% from 3. He's played 24 career G League games. Apparently, he shot 28% from 3.
Yeah, I think the 3-point shooting is that's in the unknown.
So that like
him. It's unknown.
The one good stretch. I mean, it's probably your most important sample size because it was regular season NBA games, but it looks like this massive outlier. No, so
I think the shooting question with him is in the unknown, unproven category, clearly. Yep. But I think where you feel good about him is his on-ball defense, his defensive playmaking. I know when the Grizzlies signed him, that's one of the things that they noticed. Like he had really high steal rates, that he really did a lot defensively. I think his ability to attack off the dribble and create contact and sort of pressure the paint. Those are the things you feel good about. The shooting and the playmaking are more the question marks. But I think he showed pretty good, not great, but good growth as like a more of a true point guard, lead guard playmaker in the Summer League. The shooting is the thing I'm the most uncertain about by far.
I think his huge question marks are going to be that consistent outside shooting. I think he's a good scorer. Like he's a guy who can get to that 16-foot jumper, or he can beat his guy off the dribble and get to a layup. Those are the strengths. I think the question is for him becoming either a proven backup or maybe one day being a starter. It's the consistency on the 3-pointer, and then the playmaking. Like the assisted turnover numbers are bad his whole career. Like he was sub 2-to-1 assisted turnover in the regular season. All the Summer League and even G League and just picking stats up. He's more of a scorer. He's not a table setter.
These are all good reasons you don't rush into putting him on the main roster when you don't have to. You go into the season with it. He's getting minutes, and you see where it goes.
Yep, exactly. Well, Chris, thanks a lot for coming in and talking Grizzlies with me. Where are you headed to? Out of the country?
I am headed to mostly to Scotland, to England and Scotland. My wife. It's a business trip for my wife. I get to tag along and be a +1, and so we're headed overseas this weekend.
Well, I hope you enjoy that, and I hope the Luke Kennard thing finally happens so we can put a close.
We do.
Write all our stories.
One concluding note for your listeners. I mentioned that I'd done my wrap-up column, which will be up, maybe be up as you listen. I needed to go ahead and get that done instead of wait on Kennard, because my other goal before I left the country was to do a midsummer mailbag. And so the mailbag is open. If any Grits and Grinds listeners want to throw a question into my mailbag, you can email me, cherrington@dailymemphian.com. You can put it on the comments to my wrap-up story, or you could hit me up on Twitter.
Or just
Threads.
Comment on the Grits and Grinds YouTube page, and I'll share them with Chris. It'll work out great.
Well, I was about to say, you'll have to send those my way.
I'll send them your way.
Love you, Keith. I'm not reading the comments on your YouTube.
No, I would never ask anyone to do that. I'll do it. I'll share them with you. And I'm sure, yes, we have a lot of overlap between our listeners. So you guys give Chris some great mailbag questions. And anyway, Chris, hope you have a good trip, and I'll talk to you after that and get you back on here to talk more Grizzlies.
All right. Thanks.